have had many eye-opening realizations surrounding the ideas of religion and God over the past few years, and I used to be very cynical when it came to this type of idea, like so many people in our society today. However, somehow something changed, and I honestly believe that the lessons that I have learned and the new perspectives which I have adopted have made a massive positive difference in my life. And in this video I want to share some of those lessons in the hope that someone watching may receive them and benefit from them as I have. When I was younger, I thought of believing in God as silly. I thought of some man in the sky who just could not physically exist. And you know, when someone tells you that they believe in God, it can mean that they believe in such a representation. It can mean that they just go to church every Sunday and say their prayers unquestioningly, and they never have enough insight or curiosity to think more about it. However, in this video, I want to try and demonstrate that it can mean so much more than that. That it isn't a sign of your intellectual superiority to not believe in God. That it isn't a silly belief which goes no deeper than some physical being in the sky that anyone with a brain would rise above. And most importantly, that religious ideas are more valuable and more important than we could possibly imagine. So the first point that I want to make is that we must not put an end to our dealings with religion and God once we realize that the idea of God is preposterous. You know, the idea of God is preposterous because he defies reason, but we must not fall into the trap of believing that reason is king and that we know all there is to know about God and religion. This is what I did. I realized that the idea of God is unreasonable, and so I rejected it. But we must stop thinking that we know the whole story. We need to accept that what our rational mind defaults to when we hear the word God is not all that God could be. We cannot imagine God. He is transcendent and ineffable by definition. He is something which is unreasonable because he is beyond space and time. The God that you're rejecting, the God that you have conjured up in your head, is not all that God could be. Any and all images that we can associate with God are inadequate. So the first thing that my prideful and cynical younger self needed to realize was that I'm not above believing in God. The only thing that I was above was the idea of God, the totally inadequate idea of God that I had decided to associate with him. I truly believe that you are doing yourself a massive disservice by creating this image of God in your head, deciding that that is who or what God is and all that God could be, rejecting it, and then closing the door on religious ideas. You know, I'm not saying that we aren't right to question our traditions and our beliefs. I'm glad that I did, because naivete is not good either. It's possibly worse. But I could so easily have just locked the door for good in my pride and refused to find out more. I could have let my pride run riot, thinking that I knew it all. So what exactly changed for me now that I'm making a YouTube video trying to convince you that religious ideas hold much more weight than we might like to think? Like I said, I used to be very cynical about the idea of God, and a few years ago I would have called myself an atheist. I did exactly what I'm telling you that you shouldn't do right now. I conjured up an image of God in my head and decided that that was all that God could be, and then I rejected it. But then something changed, and I can remember a turning point of some sort. It was a sort of realization where my pride crumbled and I had to accept in humility that I had been wrong all this time, or that there was a possibility of me having been wrong. Like I said, there was a distinct example that I can remember, which you might call a turning point, and it was when I first linked God to a valuable idea, and it was in an area where we seemed to be moving closer to immorality as we forget our religious traditions. I've always believed that casual sex and our current sexual culture is wrong, that there was more to life than pursuing momentary pleasure. It was clear to me that we were prioritizing our primal motivation to have sex over much more important things. Somehow I saw that the world was a worse place than it could be because so many people weren't aware of the more fulfilling things they could do as opposed to having casual sex, nor could they see the damage and harm that they were causing. I'm not exactly sure how I was aware of this, possibly something to do with my upbringing or something somewhere was telling me that our sexual culture is wrong and we need to prioritize different things. Then through a YouTube video I was able to make the connection between these ideas and the sanctity of the sexual act, which is insisted upon in so many religious traditions. This was only the beginning of a very long journey, so I seen religion and God in a new light, and I opened myself up in humility to the concept. But the journey that I went on to arrive at where I am now was filled with more pride and cynicism and condescension towards religious tradition. So I want to lay out the most convincing argument possible, which I know would have helped my younger self to be in a better place and to be less miserable and to experience more positive emotion and to have a better life, to realize the value in religious ideas. And I hope that I can help someone else watching in a similar manner. Believing and not believing, theism and atheism, are not the diametric opponents which they seem. I think that the best way to demonstrate this and to try and show that there is a world beyond the physical and material is to define God as that which we value highest. This isn't all that God is, but He is at least this. So in order to do anything, in order to participate in voluntary and consciously willed action, we need to have a goal in mind. And so imagine that you're looking at a conglomeration of all of the actions of one person in the world. You might be able to see a concrete pattern emerging as to what it is their ultimate goal is in life, what they are valuing highest. Of course, it is highly probable that they are not wholly dedicated to this in every single moment, and every human being is fragmented in some way, but there should be a clear pattern emerging. Or maybe there isn't a clear and discernible pattern, and this person is valuing highest different things, a multitude of different things in every moment. This type of consideration is what we are doing when we try to get to know someone. We are trying to figure out what it is that motivates them, what it is they are aiming at, and what it is they are valuing highest. Whether or not they have a well-integrated personality, or if they live in complete chaos and fragmentation. So all of this is an attempt to determine what it is a person values highest. And this is a definition that we give to God. So whenever you hear someone jokingly say, like, oh yeah, Elvis Presley is his God, or something along those lines, this is what they're referring to. Elvis Presley is that which they value highest. Consciously or unconsciously, we all have to have faith in something. We all have to have faith in one thing over another. Because even if all of the facts of a situation are clear to us, we still need to prioritize those facts. We still need to organize them into a structure of value if we want to perceive and act in this world. You may call yourself non-religious, but what if I told you that religion is not just whether or not you're part of some club, but that it is more accurately defined as an individual's relationship to the extra mundane factors of experience? So in other words, what do we choose to have faith in when faced with the unknown, with the unknowable even? This is one idea which might open your mind to the concept of God. You know, faith isn't optional. We can either wallow in indecision, or we can choose to have faith in something and make a decision. You might say, oh, well, I'll just rely on my own knowledge. I don't have to have faith in anything. But you don't know everything. And there may be a situation where your knowledge just isn't enough. You can choose to make your current knowledge and your rational mind, your ability to make sense of things and to reason, you can make that your God. You can decide that the greatest thing in this world is your intellect. That would be closing yourself off from the possibility of learning new things, and it would also be a sin of pride. That would be taking to yourself the ability to define good and evil and to define what we should value highest. But unless you are omniscient and omnipotent, and you have that as concrete knowledge, you are still having faith in something. So again, faith is not optional. Allow me to make the case now for why we should never close ourselves off to religion. So religious traditions and stories are the attempts of humanity to characterize the nature of the greatest good and that which should be rightly placed at the pinnacle. And these stories are said to be divinely inspired, and this is a concept that I want to focus on. I know it can be incredibly hard to conceive what it means for something to be divinely inspired, but I think if I can explain a very small part of what it might mean, it will help me to demonstrate the importance of religious traditions. The nature of your aim determines how you see the world. There is an experiment called the monkey business illusion, which I think is particularly relevant here. I've linked a video below demonstrating this experiment, and it would be good if you go and watch that video and come back. So that video highlights how the world lays itself out differently depending on your aim in life. The gorilla in that video, the curtain, the players in black are completely irrelevant to our aim of counting the number of passes that the white team makes. It just doesn't matter that there was a gorilla passing through the screen, and so we miss the strange happenings that we would otherwise think would be impossible to miss. This experiment demonstrates how we see the world. We don't just see objects around us, we see potential friends, potential foes, tools, obstacles, things which are just completely irrelevant, and we don't even see them, as the video demonstrated, and agents of magical transformation which change how we see the world, which change our aim. Let's say that our aim in life was to do the most good possible, and that were truly our aim. Now, if that were truly our aim, we would recognize that we do not have the requisite knowledge to pursue it or to fulfill such a goal. So a huge part of that aim would be to determine the nature of the good. Now, the good is a very abstract idea, and we couldn't just lay our lives out in accordance with doing the most good possible. It's too abstract. We would need to have a more concrete goal first and foremost that we could actually pursue. You would have to decide on a subset of goals which would allow you to draw up a plan for your life. But given that we are saying that our aim is truly to do the most good possible, we are as open as possible to any revelation, to anything at all, which might indicate that we need to change our aim. We are ready and receptive to any kind of agent of magical transformation which might present itself to us. You're also ready and receptive to any lessons that you could learn or knowledge that you could gain or anything that could help you on your journey to determine the nature of the good. Anything that you could learn is seen as a tool, and anything that obstructs your learning about the good is seen as an obstacle and you want to avoid it. So your aim is drawing you to things which will tell you more about how you can do the most good possible. Strange insights and revelations happen to us all the time in our daily lives. So like say for example, you're trying to solve a hard maths problem and you just don't know how to solve it, but then the answer just comes to you. Or maybe you had an idea which is particularly innovative and solves some particular problem. You didn't have that idea before, but then you just thought it up. There are so many examples of this type of thing. So for some people, something suddenly clicks and they decide to changed their career pathway, or something in your life called out to you and you cannot explain why, but it changed your priorities. We never seem to ask how these things happened or how we acquired this new knowledge. Just thinking it up isn't really a good enough answer. That such revelations came from God might not be a satisfactory answer either, but let's come back to the idea of God as that which we value highest. In the scenario that we have just laid out, we were assuming that we were valuing highest the greatest good possible. This is an abstract concept which we do not know the nature of exactly, and in all humility we accept that fact and we wholeheartedly seek out a revelation in this regard. Now, how can that be anything other than divinely inspired? Where is such a revelation to come from, if not from God? If we define God as the greatest good, if we define God as that which is transcendent and ineffable, and love itself, God in the true sense, with a capital G, is reality itself, and the good is associated with that. Life should be a quest to align our God, the one that we discussed earlier in the video, with God himself, with love itself, with good itself. The religious stories and traditions which have stood the test of time are going to be divinely inspired in this manner. At least this is a way in which we can understand the concept of divinely inspired, because we cannot comprehend it fully. Our ability to understand the divine is very much incomplete. And so I do not think that pridefully turning away from these stories just because we cannot wrap our heads around the idea of a physical God is good for us, all things considered. So what am I hoping that you take from this video? Well, firstly, if you have been shutting yourself off from the idea of God due to its incomprehensibility, I hope that I have convinced you that incomprehensibility is part and parcel of what is transcendent and ineffable. He transcends our understanding because he is transcendent. I also hope that the true purpose of religious tradition is now a little clearer to you, and that you might see our holy books as sources of wisdom rather than folly. I hope you can see that if we are truly striving towards the greatest good, that these books are tools on our journey and not obstacles. I know I've only scratched the surface of these ideas, but this channel is all about exploring them, and I plan to go deeper and deeper in future videos. So thank you very much for watching, and look out for more content like this. God bless.